And Senator Krueger, thank you as always for making time with us today. I appreciate that.
Happy to be here.
So right now, as we speak, actually, budget extenders are about to be debated on the Senate floor. This is an unusual approach the governor has taken by inserting spending cuts into the budget extenders and forcing the legislature to choose between a shutdown and accepting his cuts. These are going to pass today, but perhaps if he goes along in this vein, it's not going to be so easy.
Well, it certainly is a change of pace to have a governor submit a significant portion of his budget within an emergency extender bill. As you pointed out, we're talking about up to $775 million in health care cuts in this extender bill. And what is happening is the governor is attempting to jumpstart negotiations on the full budget by forcing the legislature's hand in a budget extender bill tonight.
Well, how do you feel about that? I mean, to have your hand forced is perhaps not exactly the recognition of the balance of power between the executive and the legislature. This is not a traditional way. It's actually, he's gotten quite a bit of attention for this, and much of it positive from editorial boards around the state.
Well, for me, it goes back to a whole package of budget reform proposals that I've been working on, highlighting that the way we do the budget in New York State isn't a very good way. It traps everybody in positions they don't want to be in. I don't think in a textbook case the governor doing this is a perfect model for a perfect model for government, but clearly it is getting everyone's attention. And I do think that this process has started to jumpstart total negotiations on the budget. Today, really for the first time, you're hearing in both houses, both parties, a recognition that we need to get this budget done this week before we face the same situation a week from now.
Well, because if, in fact, he continued along this vein, and it appears that he's quite willing to do that, he could put something quite onerous in that it was clear that the legislature hated, like the soda tax, for example, or maybe education cuts, because my understanding is that both houses, particularly your house, were quite willing to go along with the health care cuts.
Well, the budget extender with the changes in health care tonight is not significantly different than our budget resolution. So I agree, this is not necessarily such a leap for the Senate Democrats because we were relatively in the same place 6-8 weeks ago. But the precedent of attempting to do a budget in pieces within emergency extender bills is certainly an unprecedented move.
It's kind of a sad commentary that it's gotten to this point. We're talking about a budget that's more than 2 months late. Do you think it's appropriate for the governor to have done this? I mean, he's clearly at the end of his rope.
I think that the governor is frustrated as we have been frustrated, and I know the Assembly's been frustrated. So when time is short, actually technically time is out, and we are in a terrible economic situation where every day that we don't get a budget done, we're pushing a bigger problem off for the next day and the next day. One should anticipate, to some degree, thinking outside the box, and nobody being happy with both the actions at any given day, or I would argue at the final end of the process. We are not going to have a budget that people are going to feel good about. We're talking about cutting $9 billion out of the state budget. The people who were screaming in the halls of the Capitol today were screaming about real pain, real harm being done with the health care cuts. We can say across the board we're going to see that kind of response. The fact is the economy and the federal government haven't really left us very many options.
Do you really think, though, that when push comes to shove, your colleagues are going to have the intestinal fortitude when facing a potentially different, and I'm talking about your colleagues on both sides of the aisle, not just the Democrats who, supposedly who are in power and supposedly all the dysfunction is being placed at their lap, but really the Republicans and the Democrats in your House, because things are so close there and they're battling for the majority. Will they have the ability to accept these cuts? The people who were screaming, as you mentioned, were $11.99. That's a very powerful health care union, and certainly when it comes time for campaigns, people are going to want them on their side.
Well, governing requires making hard decisions, and it means people are going to get mad at you. My Republican colleagues on the other side of the aisle for several weeks now have refused to vote for budget extenders, even though they know that if these bills don't pass, we shut down government, and technically all state workers get a permanent furlough. So I don't understand people who can easily say we'll shut down government rather than take tough votes. But my colleagues again on the Senate Republicans have to some degree become, like their national compatriots, the party of no. They would rather not face the music of having to tell anybody they took hard votes.
But isn't this easy, just to play devil's advocate, for you to say you're in a relatively safe seat? You actually have a minimal opponent. You actually were at one point facing a primary, but you're no longer facing a primary. And I know that you have said in the past that you think it's completely appropriate for anybody to be primaried and that they should all have to be expected to fight for their seats. But you sit from a fairly safe place. There are colleagues in your